My husband actually called me out recently and he said, you don't always have to be doing something. I was like, what are we going to be doing? What's the plan? What are we doing? He said, there is no plan. And he says, you need a hobby. And I said, being busy is my hobby. And he said, that's the problem.
I'll have to get an update on you where I interview you.
Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. On our weekly episodes, we will dig into everything you need to know about scaling your service-based business without losing sleep. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're thrilled to have Allison Reeves with us here in the studio, a world-class marketing expert whose journey is nothing short of remarkable. She's been blogging since 2011 and business coaching since 2017. Allison has mastered the art of combining strategic business consulting with mindset restoration to help entrepreneurs and companies scale their income. But Allison's business is more than just about making money. It's about helping people love their lives. With consecutive multiple six-figure years under her belt, Allison's wide range of marketing experience covers both solopreneurs and corporate settings. Allison holds a ton of marketing certifications, including SEO, digital marketing, email marketing, funnels, learning about the customer journey, and more. But that's not all. She's also certified in somatic healing, art therapy, meditation, law of attraction, abundance mindset, and sound healing. Her superpowers include so many of these things, and she has really focused in on trauma-informed manifesting and the law of attraction. Today, we're going to explore all sorts of tips, tricks, and parts of Allison's journey, her insights into the world of marketing, and how she helps people not just make more money, but truly love their lives. So let's dive in. Hello, Allison, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about your journey to your business. How did you get here?
Yeah, good question. I started blogging in 2011 because I was writing music, which you'll see some guitars in the video behind me. Started writing music and painting on acrylic, and I was like needing to do something with all of that artwork. So I hacked together a WordPress blog in 2011, and then my job at the time promoted me to website administrator, which launched me into HTML, CSS, SEO, and luckily we don't have to create our websites like that anymore. But that's kind of what got me started in entrepreneurship. Before then, I wasn't really sure like what I was going to do when I grew up. I was an executive assistant, and so the blog really just kind of launched everything I'm doing now.
You know, it's so funny that you say that because we had a guest a couple of weeks ago who also started with a blog, definitely not with the intention of creating his business, and fast forward later, obviously a totally different direction. It's so interesting because I think blogging has really changed from what it used to be. And I think that if we go back to that time where people were creating genuine value and sharing it on the internet in the form of a blog, compared to now where blogging is mostly done for let's add fresh content to the website, let's add keywords. It's, mostly AI generated. It doesn't have a story so much. It's more SEO focused. I miss the days of the real blog. I really do. So do you feel like you were always an entrepreneur at heart, or do you think that you've kind of grown into that role?
If you were to ask me 10 years ago, I would say I've grown into it. But now, with more context of my life, I feel like, yeah, I've always been a little bit entrepreneur. I've definitely always been a creative, like a creator person. But it's crazy to me now, when I was creating artwork, like I was painting acrylic on canvas with no formal training. It was just something I started doing. We used to paint ceramics when I was growing up in my house. And my mom would always do craft shows at Christmas. That's where she got all of our Christmas money from. But in hindsight, I think it's pretty crazy that I was selling paintings for a couple $100 sometimes. Or like I was getting giclée prints made of these. And my sister and I have always been creative. I wouldn't even say like entrepreneur so much as like we love to create and produce. So when we were in elementary school, we would record ourselves on tapes. We would record like audio workout sessions. We were like an aerobics class, but it was just audio because we just had the tapes. So we were always kind of like creating and teaching and producing and putting these things together. So now if you were to ask me, I would say like I've always been entrepreneurial, but 10 years ago, I didn't really know. I wasn't celebrating those components in my story as much.
It's so interesting. And you talk about kind of those things from the past. So my daughter is turning 11 this year. And I don't know why it's like such a mind thing to me that my oldest is 11, because I feel like I distinctly remember being 11. Like 11 is a time that like I'm so clear about like what I was doing and those kinds of things. And actually at 11 is when I started my first business. And so I used to ride horses really competitively, and I came up with, I was in the barn. I was a barn kid all the time. And I came up with this idea that I wanted to host summer camps. You know, you see all these cool movies and things where people go and do these fun summer camps. And so I decided, hey, I want to host a summer camp. And so for 2 summers in a row, I did all the advertising and the marketing and would host, and we'd have like 15 kids come with their horses and stay for the week and do all these games and activities and whatnot. And so at the time, it really just seemed like, hey, this is what we do. But my daughter turning 11, because I was 11 when I started doing that, and I look at my daughter at 11 and I'm like, I'm sorry, I was doing what? I literally had a conversation with my mom and I was like, so were we crazy back then? And she's like, I don't know, it was a different time, I guess. And so it's funny when you start to see it. And so that was really my first entrepreneurial adventure, was doing that. And I would always say now, I'm not a real entrepreneur. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just kind of situationally ended up as an entrepreneur. So it's funny when you're sharing your story, I was like, oh, maybe if we go way back when, I had some entrepreneurial tendencies back then. So do you still paint?
I go through phases of creating. So I try to do something creative, like per my spiritual coach's recommendation, do things that don't have an end goal, do things that are not just for money. So like I got into painting shoes for a little bit, or my sister actually painted this painting for me in the background, the one on my wall. But yeah, I do it for fun, but not like how I was doing it back then.
I think as business owners, that's really a tough piece when you mentioned just doing something without an outcome, doing something that's not for money. I think that as business owners, now our audience typically, I'm not anti-hustle. I love my business, and most of the people I work with love their businesses, and everyone's all in. When you have time, you usually default to using it to move something along. And it might be, I definitely love the more creative side. Even though we have a social media team, I might decide, hey, I'm going to throw a wrench in all their plans. I'm feeling creative. It's a fun thing for me to do, to go play and do some graphics and do some stuff and that kind of thing. But it's still towards the business. I think there's something so valuable in that statement, because it's actually really hard when you're a busy business owner to actually just take the time to do something that's just for you.
Yeah, but it's really important. It's like the 2 things that come to mind when you like reflect all that back to me are, number 1, it's like cross training a bit, or like cross training, in athletics can make you stronger. So if you're a cyclist and you pick up running, for example, it makes you stronger. And I think what we tend to do, it's very easy in Western culture in general, but then especially in entrepreneurship, we kind of lean into the masculine energy, like really prominently, where we want to do, we want to get results, we want to set goals, we want to have plans, and all those things are really important. And we forget to balance that with the feminine energy of resting, trusting, leaning back, which is almost like can be cross training for your business. Like you can become a better entrepreneur by leaning into doing nothing a little bit more.
I feel like you just like reached to the screen, reached into my soul and like pulled out something. I was like, oh gosh, I feel so
I didn't
violated.
mean to call you out so early.
Oh, I feel very called out. Yes, guilty as charged. It really lends itself into that work that you do, though, and talking about the mindset and the different energies and stuff. So let's dig into that a little further and say, I think that it's not just me. I'm not alone in this challenge. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why I know about anything that I know about, is because I went through it. And like, I've been working with the same coach for almost 2 years now. And my biggest lesson from her was like, you've got the masculine side down. You're good at the marketing. You know how to make money. But I had gotten to this point where, I mean, the year before I'd met this coach, I'd gotten to a point where I just did not enjoy anything about life anymore. I'd been working really hard in my business, and I was doing so many things that were out of alignment. And I would have kept doing that if it kept working, like over investing in masterminds and going all in on Facebook ads and all these really masculine strategies. And it worked until it didn't. Joining expensive masterminds and pushing myself to the limits worked until it didn't. And I don't think I would have started leaning into feminine energy if I felt like I had a choice. For me, it was almost like I've tried everything else and my business is broken. I went from my biggest month ever was $60K. And then I had a lot of ups and downs, but I was paying myself less and less. And then I had a month where I had an almost $0 in new sales. And I thought like something is broken, and I've tried everything else. I've paid a bunch of other people a bunch of money, and the feminine energy and the leaning back and trusting, which is really scary. It's a lot easier to like, something is broken, let me do something about it. it's hard to just say like something is broken and I don't know the answer and I have to do nothing for a little bit and wait for the answer.
That sounds very challenging because I would agree. I'm like, okay, problem identified. Let's go solve that problem. Problem identified. Let's go solve that problem. And I do think when you talk about the feminine energy, there's a strange feeling where it's like, is it really important though? Is kind of how I think. And I think it is, but I think that we're so conditioned. I mean, I came from a corporate world, shared lots on the podcast where, I mean, I was almost always the only woman in the room or the woman at the table. And it became kind of this joke, really, that it was like, well, you're just like one of the guys. And it was part of one of the reasons that led me down the path to leaving, because they would sit around the table and they would talk about their wives at home. And it was such a different discussion to be a part of because, like, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Well, I was not necessarily a fly, but I was there. But it was almost like they perceived that those comments would not affect me because I wasn't really like one of their wives. And I was like, no, but I am. I still am. And so very interesting as you're talking about that, because if we go back to that traditional kind of role piece where you have, well, women are going to raise the kids and then men are going to do the work. I mean, at my house, we all raise the kids and we all work, my husband and I. But at the end of the day, there is still some of these things that are so ingrained in us in terms of what is feminine, what is masculine and all of that, that it's hard to get away from, even if you try. Like, even if you're conscious about it, it still is.
Yeah. I wish there was a different term for it too. I wrote a whole blog post about feminine versus masculine, and yin and yang is like the only example where it's not a gendered term. It's not really meant to be. It's about the energy of those things. And to your point, I think that's a really valid question. Like, how important is it to lean into feminine energy and feminine energy versus masculine? Like, I already kind of defined that, but for people who are really unfamiliar, like masculine energy is all about planning, force, action, doing. Feminine energy is more intuition, rest, creativity, leaning back. And many of us, there's two things that happen. One is our society kind of judges the feminine or thinks that it's not as valuable. So we have a lot of bias in regards to how effective it can be. But also, you're not going to work on it unless you have a motivation to, right? So if things are going well the way you're doing things, you're not going to be like, well, let me just dabble in feminine energy. It's like, for me, things were quote unquote like not working anymore. They were broken. I was unhappy. I had lost myself. I didn't know how to lead myself anymore. And to me, feminine energy helped me to start manifesting in my business again instead of just trying to force results all the time. But to your point, like, you're not going to work on the feminine energy if things are just working great how you're doing them right now.
I think, though, there comes a point where everyone's scale of success, happiness, what's going on in their business is so different. What one person thinks is amazing is what another person is like, yeah, that was kind of average. And so I always say, sure, it's easiest to say it's working for me, but it's this bigger open the mind question of, but what could be, if we look at something else and we are a little more open-minded, what is the true potential? Just because things are going well doesn't mean that it can't go significantly better. Like, there are people that are out there that are on whatever the scale of success you use. There are people out there that are ahead of you, always. And so it's like, what is the potential for yourself? And sometimes it's only our own limitation where we're like, oh, I'm doing so great. But it's also being willing to think like, but what is possible?
Yeah. I remember I heard this quote from Taylor Welch, who's a coach in a mastermind I was in. And he said, as your business grows, your self-care should grow. And so often we do the opposite. We get busier and busier in business and spend less and less time on ourselves. And in that mastermind I was in, I remember like going to one of those live events and there's 300 people in a room. And I would say at least half of them are millionaires. They're all successful or multi or 8-figure. And the questions in that room were not, how do I get more leads? The question in that room was like, how do I find purpose again? How do I enjoy my life again? How can I improve my relationship with my family, who I've like half abandoned in these last 3 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think all of the other pieces ultimately can be solved. It's the question of, oh, I need more leads. Well, there's a lot of people that are amazing at that. So if that's your challenge, you solve it. And as business, any entrepreneur, business owner that has seen some success is resourceful. So for things that are external, more leads, a new website, a new offer, better messaging, more social media, all of those things. I mean, you can go in today's society, you can reach anywhere in the planet and find the person that is best for that for you and solve it within a few days, really. I mean, but those questions on purpose and how does it feel good and repairing relationships, and there's no one. That's even if you know it's a problem and there is someone that could help you solve it, you don't even know what you're asking for. You don't know what, like, you're just stuck. That really all comes back to mindset. It's time for that mindset to grow. So you're writing a book. Tell me, how does your book tie into this discussion?
So the book is probably going to be called Embodied Abundance. And I like to describe it as a trauma-informed approach to manifesting. So in business, like most of us are familiar with mindset in our business. So we know like we have limiting beliefs, and we know that really before 50K months, one of your biggest factors of success is just self-belief. But what I struggled with in my business was learning mindset and having a lot of success with that. And then like quote unquote mindset stopped working. So I was like, why are affirmations not working? Why am I still getting stuck on these like anxiety cyclones? And I saw the same thing in my clients. I saw these same patterns and cycles in my clients that I realized the mindset is just part of changing our self-belief. Because your mind, if you think about your head and your brain, it's just a small part of your body's processing power. If you don't use your nervous system to go along with your mindset, you're missing out on a lot more processing power and embodiment opportunities for those new beliefs. And so in the book, I identify 5 core, what I call wealth wounds, which are just money mindset issues, and then the antidotes to those. Because kind of along with what we're saying, if you're worried about money when you don't have it, and then you're worried about money when you do, it was never about the money. And so often in entrepreneurship, we see scarcity, worthiness, fear just showing up over and over again at all levels. And so that's kind of the basis of the book.
Interesting. There's so many different ways of approaching money. We've had money coach Bree Sedano on the podcast a couple of times in 2 seasons. And so I've been following her journey. She's also writing a book and whatnot. So many of the things that she says, it's interesting because I actually have a good friend who does a lot of work with her. And she will say something to me and I'll be like, I don't know if I've ever thought that. It's interesting. And my friend will say like, oh my gosh, you don't? I thought that was so normal. And so it's interesting because it goes back to that old expression, money makes people funny. And so often we have things around money, wealth, whatever, that nobody really talks about because you don't really talk about money with your friends. And so if you've got anything that is not working around that, you just kind of sit with it. And we see that. I see it in business owners who are in kind of their second year of business when we're talking about let's set the budget and let's do these things and we're working on through the numbers. And so many of them have really just shied away from money discussions for their business, which you need. You need the data, you need the numbers, you need to know this. But people are like, oh, I don't really know. And I'm like, no, like we have to dive into this. And it's, the concept of like, well, I don't really know how much money I made last year, or I don't really have my numbers, or, find people either go one of 2 ways, and it's either a blind trust in everything will work out no matter what it costs. They'll just keep spending. And sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And they sit at the end and think, how did I spend that much money and have nothing? Where the alternative is that people are penny pinching on the expression to step on 5 to pick up a penny. Where it's middle ground is not as common. It's either we're managing it so closely that it's actually distracting from the success of the business, or we're not managing it at all.
Yeah, those are such great examples. So I identify the first one as money avoidance, which obviously that's a good name for it. It's like not looking at it. And even with some of my really successful coaching clients, we've had to just start because I really relate to this. When I was first looking at money, like my solution to my avoidance of finances was just to make more and to make more and to make more and to make more. And again, that worked until it didn't. But because I was avoiding it, I wasn't really aware of how little I was paying myself. So I was like making all these sales, and because I wasn't looking at it, I wasn't in tune with reality. And so my finances journey just started like hiring someone to look at it, and I'm not going to look at it. And then it became, I'm going to track it in my notes app on my phone, just so I have a loose idea on what's coming in, what's going out. And so you have to ease into it because my nervous system would literally go into like a trauma response. If I had somebody asking me too many questions about the budget or like projections, I just got so anxious. And then fear is like, I have a client right now who she has a lot of money and she's not making any money in her business right now, but in her full-time career, she will be able to make so much money that she could just take 2 years off and build up her creator business. But that's the other end of the spectrum where she kind of gets herself in trouble sometimes because she is so afraid to spend that she doesn't hire support. She could be maybe growing faster, or she's editing YouTube videos. She's editing 20-minute YouTube videos on her phone. So she didn't tell me that. She was unwilling to like buy a new laptop, use a video editor, but she kept saying like, "Oh, Allison, it's just taking me so long to edit my videos." I was helping her with productivity tips, and finally she bought a new computer, and she confessed to me that she'd been using her phone to edit these 20-minute videos, and I'm like, "Oh, that's why they were taking you so long." But that's like an example of the fear and the scarcity was causing her to not invest, even though it would have been a healthy level to invest at. But yeah, those are two great examples, avoidance and fear.
I think it's the online business space or the, bootstrapped kind of online space. Because, if we go back, if you were going to start a business back in the day, you had your business plan and you went and you decided, well, it's going to cost me, I'm going to need to get a space and I'm going to need to get a desk and I'm going to need to get all of these things. And there was like a startup. And I think so common now, it's this shift of, well, you can like pretty much do anything with your phone. If you have an internet connection and a good phone, you could really build a business. And while I agree with that, I also think that certain things, like you were just saying, take so long. We'll travel and meet with clients sometimes. So we'll spend like 3 days working in a hotel room, do like a big project. I don't leave home without my mouse. I have a laptop, and sure, it has one of those little trackpad kind of things. But let me tell you, if I have to spend 3 days working off a trackpad, I can't. My frustration with how long, and I'm pretty particular about my keyboard and mouse and my setup and stuff, so I hate working off my laptop, but without a mouse, it is game over because it becomes so inefficient. And so we're sitting there for over the 3 days and she goes, I don't know why I never thought of that. And I said, thought of what? And she's like, the mouse. She says, I've been watching you for 2 days thinking, why did I never just buy a mouse? She's like, it's like $40 for the mouse. I was like, yes, you just throw it in your laptop bag. We're not talking about bringing the whole kitchen sink. She's like, I ordered one last night. Amazon's delivering it to the hotel. And literally like that last day was like, oh my gosh, this is such a game changer. But it's those things. It's the same thing as if you have a sore knee and you're like, oh, it always hurts. And then 6 months later, you're like, oh yeah, my knee's been hurting for a while. It's a slow festering thing instead of an immediate problem. And so it's not until you see or you try the other side that you're like, oh my gosh, I should have. It's the people who are like, their backs are killing them because they're still working at the kitchen table or hunched over, or they don't have the mouse, or they're working off the phone. I mean, I edit some videos off my phone, but like I wouldn't sit down for like a full YouTube video editing session on my phone. That would be crazy. But we do that. And it's the opportunity cost that we often forget about because we only factor, it just takes a little more time of my own. But when it's on a bigger scale, it's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and that you highlighted it's another problem that a lot of us face that kind of relates to the feminine energy too, which is like disembodiment. We're all so busy, we're all just plowing forward all the time that we're kind of taught not to feel, or we're taught to deprioritize feelings. And we're taught that feelings are not productive, but what you're sharing is such a great example of what if she just been intentional about something about this is uncomfortable? What if she bought a mouse 2 years ago and always traveled with it and was able to increase her productivity 10% just because she was feeling and being present in her body? But I do those kinds of little things, hopefully less now, but all the time, where I'll just feel this something nagging, and we're just so, again, used to plowing through and then just stopping and being like, oh, I could deal with this and that would be more comfortable. I could make my life better here if I just paid attention.
It always just comes down to, for me, breaking down, if I could do that in half the time, what could I do with the other half the time? And so, is it an extra sales call that you could fit in? Is it an extra, if you're a part of doing your business, is there more billable work you could do? Or could you perhaps just take a few minutes to even think about something else? Earlier on in our discussion, we were talking about self-care. And, one of the most useful times for me, which is going to sound funny, is getting a massage. And I'm going to tell you why, because there's very, very few times in my life where I am awake and just thinking. I'm not thinking about, are we late for something? I'm not thinking about, the next thing. I'm not thinking about, is someone safe? My kids are still young. So even at a sports practice, you're watching the other kids. The massage is one of the few times where you're just in the moment and you just are there. And I have come up with some of my greatest ideas, concepts, thoughts on the massage table. And so I always think a good massage always pays for itself on the backside. But we just don't prioritize that kind of stuff, when you're busy. And so it really is seeing the value in that. I was working, it's book accounting tax season. I work closely with a CPA in the States, and we were messaging back and forth, and it was kind of late. And I said, "Oh, I'll send that over to you shortly." And he said, "No." He said, "Send it to me tomorrow." He said, "I'm not looking at it now until tomorrow." He said, "Go do something else." And I said, "No, it's fine. Like, I'll get it in." And he was like, "Take the time and go do something else." And it was nice that even though busy season, it is coming up more. And I think that people are more cognizant of the fact that there is still value in the slower times, but it's a hard sell sometimes.
It can be a hard sell, yeah. But again, as your business grows, your self-care should grow. And at some point, if you don't prioritize that balance, then your body will prioritize it for you.
Yeah, just before Christmas, I got really sick, actually. Really, I was sick and I kept working and it was sick and I kept working and working. I ended up in the hospital. It was an absolute disaster. And it was really that moment of like, holy cow, like ignoring the body. At one point, the body just says enough is enough. While you're in it, it's so easy to look back now and think, well, of course that was a bad idea. But I feel like as entrepreneurs, we're always kind of just chasing that next kind of light at the end of the short tunnel where you're like, it's just this project. It's just this offer. It's just this one file. But it's always on the backside. What I have learned over the last 3 years of my business is that view of kind of chasing that just next thing, there's always something behind it. There's always a next thing, and they seem to flow together. And so, I'm an advocate for short-term pain, long-term gain, and I work hard and we can crank things out, but you still have to at least schedule in some kind of time to take it a little slower.
Yeah, and rest can really help you become more resilient. And part of that is just because it's not easy for us. So it can be uncomfortable to put the phone down. Like you're not getting that, what is it, like hit of dopamine or serotonin or whatever it is when you're looking at notifications, or it takes discipline and that can make you more resilient. And again, it feels like cross training for entrepreneurship is like you'll become a better service provider. You'll become a better person by letting yourself like lean into the other side.
Yes, absolutely. So the coaching that you're doing, where are people learning more about that? Where are people seeing information? Where do you like to hang out?
Yeah, I do a lot on my website. So I blog a whole bunch, and then I have a Facebook group called the Mindful Marketing Mavens. And I think my email list is probably my biggest focus. I've just been really enjoying not being on social all the time, even though I post all the time. I'm not like on it like I used to be. I really just love having the email list to like, you read it when you can. We come together in the Facebook group. But everything that I have, including all the free offers I have and any communities I have, are on AllisonReeves.co/everything, which is just an easy place to find everything that I offer.
Awesome. Amazing. And so you said the book you think is called, so it must still be in the writing stages. So when are you hoping to get that book out?
The launch date is June 6th. So
Ooh, it's coming.
Yes, it's coming up, which is, I just have been kind of like in progress, as I'm sure anyone who's ever, even if you've thought about writing a book, you've been in this process of it just hangs out in your brain forever and it's in limbo, half written forever. So there's a date, it's happening, no guarantees in the quality, but it's called Embodied Abundance and it's a trauma-informed approach to manifesting.
Incredible. Incredible. So if someone had one tangible tip from whether it's your book or some of your resources, the coaching work that you do, something that you could share that someone can go and implement inside their life and business that they can really start to see that quick win, understand a little bit more what you do, what would that be?
I think relevant to this conversation, I would say a really good routine to have is a routine around doing nothing. So just starting to challenge yourself, starting to get uncomfortable. Like it's very uncomfortable when we've been plowing through our lives and just really focus on productivity. It's really uncomfortable to slow down. And so if you can gift yourself time to sit by your favorite tree, sit in your chair and do nothing, maybe do some breath work, I really think it will improve how you can lead yourself in your business and how you just feel in your life.
Well, I don't know if that really works for everyone, but I feel very called out again. So I think I'll take that tip straight back to the soul. I see how it is. My husband actually called me out recently and he said, you don't always have to be doing something. I was like, what are we going to be doing? What's the plan? What are we doing? He said, there is no plan. And he says, you need a hobby. And I said, being busy is my hobby. And he said, that's the problem.
I'll have to get an update on you where I interview you.
There you go. It's funny though, because you do get to the point where as a business owner, when you're going and you're growing and you're doing all the things, and it kind of does eliminate other things that you used to do, other things you've kind of fallen out of or don't do anymore. And so it's really taking the time to actually even decide and put some planning into what other things could I, because sitting there doing nothing, I don't know. I mean, that, oof. That's a challenge. Challenge accepted. I'll give it a try, but challenge.
Yeah, give it a try. Or do something for no reason. Could be another.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I will be sure to drop your website and group into the notes for those who want to check it out. Join and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
We're all out of time for today, but the fun doesn't stop here. Make sure to subscribe to the Service-Based Business Society podcast on your preferred podcast app. Your likes, shares, and reviews really do help the show. Until next time, have a great week.